Hello my friends, I'm Endgame TV, currently first place in the world rank as Dps in the KS server. I stream every day on Twitch, so I'd appreciate it if you could follow me via my link in the description below. In today's video, I'm going to talk about Dps engravings. So, today, the first engraving that I will introduce is Grudge. Grudge is the biggest DPS boost engraving for DPS class. While this engraving gives a huge DPS boost, it has a heavy penalty which would make surviving even harder for classes with low health and defense stats. Because of this, there are many people who are starting to voice their thoughts on not using Grudge and instead use other DPS engravings which generally have around 4% less damage increase but also have weaker penalties. However, in the end, the damage received from Grudge's penalty is negligible. If you don't get hit, and even if you do, increasing your defense from your gear cancels out the penalty to some degree. For a certain range of levels for tri-parties, there are opinions where not having Grudge make it less stressful to inflict damage, and this is more than enough to make up for the 4% DPS difference from engravings. This does have a point, but that only applies to this range. When people eventually increase their gear score much higher than that range, whether you have Grudge or not, that will be used to the patterns and be able to easily recognize when you are able to do damage. Also, if you repeatedly clear the same contents or raid over and over again, eventually you end up being experienced enough to avoid only what you must and dish out damage while tanking hits, using potions or heals and shields from supports. Whether from increasing defense stats or from becoming experienced or both, when you overcome that stage of going into tri-parties at certain item levels, Grudge becomes an excellent engraving with a 20% DPS increase with only a light penalty. When they start understanding this, even the people who voiced against using Grudge will eventually start using it themselves. There is also another reason. It is true that now there are more options for DPS engravings, but there are engravings that have prerequisites where some classes may not able to fulfill. For example, Kimblunt is most efficient when you have high critical rate. Master of Ambush and Master Brawler is only for classes that has back attack and head attack in most of their skills. Mass Increase has attack speed reduction penalty. Precise Dagger has a critical damage reduction penalty. And even Adrenaline, which look like it doesn't have a penalty, but there is a difference in terms of efficiency with a class that can easily maintain their Adrenaline stacks and classes that can't. Looking at this, it looks like there are many DPS engraving options, but depending on the class, there are engravings that are hard to utilize and possibly bring difficulties as harsh as Grudge penalty. Lastly, when you compare raid parties with 6 DPS classes using Grudge and parties that don't use Grudge, the party that uses Grudge will definitely come across less patterns, mechanics. In endgame raid, like Hard Brush Shaja, whether you have high health and defense stats, even Galancers lose half their HP if they get hit without shield. There are also many patterns which make your character fall off the map, which kills you regardless of how much health you have before. Seeing these patterns more or less times is definitely a huge factor that plays a big role in the party's overall survival rate. Of course, even then, parties without Grudge will be more stable in general, but what I want to focus on is that by having that extra 4% over damage from Grudge and potentially skipping some of these insta-skill patterns, the penalty becomes a worthy risk. To summarize, it is understandable to use DPS engraving other than Grudge during tri-party item level ranges. However, that only applies to tri-party levels, and when people eventually become very experienced with the raid or increase their item level by a lot, the Grudge penalty becomes negligible. In the long run, everyone will eventually use Grudge. Also, depending on the class, to begin with, there are DPS engravings that are hard to use, and if everyone uses Grudge, then you come across less patterns, and there won't to be much chance of accidents. I would recommend using Grudge starting from Argos or Button. For Mayhem Joker, there is two kinds of option, with Grudge and without Grudge, because Mayhem Joker can use other engraving also. So I'm gonna explain about it when my Mayhem Joker guide come out. Thank you so much for watching video, and I'm going to explain about other DPS engraving for next video. Thank you so much.